Kayla Ashley, welcome back to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I just saw you at Vision Expo not too long ago.
hmm
So,
Yes. Yeah. Vision
uh,
Expo West or East. Sorry, Vision Expo East
Vision Expo
in
East,
Orlando.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, or for those that are not clients yet of your company, Be Spexy, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Yeah. So, my name is Kayla. I started out in the optical industry 18 years ago now, and realized very quickly that optometrists leave a lot of money on the table. And I was really lucky to work with a set of brothers that were ODs, and basically started to use my background in my business and marketing, and started showing them ways that they could start making more money based upon the inventory that they held in their optical. And then that grew into teaching opticals about better management of their inventory. And then that grew into, me going into these different offices, but it costs a lot of money to have me go into an office. It costs that practice a bit of money. And so we decided, you know what, I'm teaching all of these offices, whether they're small or large, the same concepts. And so let's go about taking these trainings and let's put them in an online platform so that they can have basically access to all of the learning. And we kind of have now Spexy, which is an online learning platform. And it's kind of like Netflix for optical training. So just like you have a subscription to Netflix, you have a subscription to Spexy, and optometrists and their teams can log in and do new hire training, do billing mastery training, learn how to kind of take the burden of social media and to kind of start to optimize their social media a little bit so that when they do plan on marketing, they have something to show. But there's a whole bunch of different offerings that we have as far as online trainings, and it's always growing every month. So that's what we have for optometrists.
Yeah, the feedback has been exceptional too. I mean, I know we have a lot of iDoc members who use your service. So yeah, it's definitely worth looking into if you haven't already. I know a lot of people probably listen to this are already part of your fan club. So the ones who haven't, though, definitely worth. If you listen to the end, I'm going to ask you to expand on that or where they can find out more about you and the company.
Oh.
But you mentioned before, doctors leaving money on the table. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And we're going to dig into that topic a little bit today. And we're going to talk about the dreaded walkout, right? It's something that I think has become more prevalent over the years. A patient comes in, they get their script, and then they leave somewhere else. There's other options out there, whether it's going to a corporate outlet, whether it's going online. There's a lot of other options out there. It has been widely discussed how to improve capture rates in the industry, right? A lot of articles, a lot of people speak on this, and the topic often comes to things like improving the handoff to the optician, or having more exciting frame lines, or budget lines for the price shopper, competitive pricing. The thing that doesn't get as much attention is communication. What are we actually saying to the patient that might influence them one way or the other? And when we were emailing before, you sent me something, and I'm going to quote you, Kayla,
Okay.
and then we'll lead into the topic itself. But you said something in the email you sent me. You said we implemented a new training initiative for the entire optical team this last year, utilizing influential communication, and the results in capture rate numbers are freaking amazing. Okay, so
So
you just
true.
got, yeah, freaking amazing, and I didn't edit that. You said freaking, so but yeah, you that last part gets a lot of doctors' attention. So maybe just give for to start this off an overview. What are we doing wrong before we get into what are we doing right and how do we become more influential communicators? What are some of the things that we're doing wrong that are having a negative impact on sales?
Yeah. The things that we are doing wrong are we are doing what the rest of society is doing. Okay. In today's society, I went yesterday and got a coffee at the coffee shop. And for those who are listening and not watching, I will act it out. But the little gal was like, "All right, your coffee will be a gazillion dollars, I swear." And so I hand her, my card, and she runs my card, and not once does she look up on me. She kind of glanced at me when I walked in, but not once did she was, putting things into the little computer and then swiped my card and was like, "All right, thank you." And then not really making any sort of effort to look up at me. And the unfortunate thing is that in today's society, we are so used to having these very disconnected interactions with people that when we get some connection, like we're blown away, right? We're like, "Oh my gosh, that was the best experience ever. I love that little boutique," or "I love that, server," or "I love," whenever we get these connections, it's so much more genuine now more than ever because today's society is really lacking in creating human connection. And this actually was brought to my attention about a year-ish ago, where I had gone in to do an immersion event in a practice, and that's where we go in and we spend a few days really learning about how we can help this practice, and then we teach them, and then we do an implementation with them. And this practice has been a Spexy member for a long time, and I went in there, and they're saying the things that I've taught them to say. They're doing the handoff. They're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing, but they lacked, let's just say, charisma. They're they didn't have that it factor, right? And I was like, wow, they're really missing the boat, yet they're doing everything I told them to do. And what I realized is charisma and kind of that human connection is not something that comes natural to a lot of people, unfortunately. But I also learned that this is something that can be taught. And so, teaching influential communication is something that's super, super powerful, not only with the way we verbally communicate, but our nonverbal cues as well. So optometrists and doctors, I'm sorry, optometrists and opticians and front desk, and even you in everyday life can be optimizing how we're using our communication to be more influential and more impactful with the people we're interacting with.
I completely agree on connection being so critical toward the outcomes that you get. And your area of expertise in the optical, I'm curious your thoughts on this because I talk a lot about this in the exam lane, how to connect better with the patients. Now, doctors will talk a lot about educating the patients, which is extremely important. It's a cornerstone of what we do, but education alone, information alone, can be surprisingly ineffective in getting people to actually do something and getting them to buy something or take some action
Right.
that will benefit them. So a lot of the things that I talk and speak about do have to do with connection. Can you elaborate on that in, let's say, in the optical, if maybe that would be an area that you would have more insight on? You take an optician who's knowledgeable about frames and eyewear, and they're educating the patient, and that's a good thing. But how do we take it to that next level to actually build connection with that individual?
Right. Well, I'm going to answer your optical question. However, when your patient comes into the office, they don't speak to the optical first. And there needs to be this human connection being created because it will create an internal connection with them with your office. So from the front desk, they need to be, and we can go over examples of all these too, but the front desk connections that they can be making, there are multiple things that we can be guiding the patient on to ensure better human connection. In pre-test, the techs, there's some huge significant I guess validation that they can be giving the patient that they're in the right spot, they've come to the right place, we're going to help them with their issues. Um, so by the time they get to the doctor, the patient already has this great connection with what's going on in the office. And then the doctor, we also have techniques that we can go over as well, to go about creating better communication and connection, and to get the patient to feel heard is one of the biggest things, because nobody listens if they feel like they are not being heard as well. And that's one thing where doctors miss out a lot, is having that disconnect from, I'm going to educate you, I'm going to educate you, but if the patient doesn't feel heard in the first place, going to fall on deaf ears, right? And so then by the time we get to the optician, the handoff can be completely optimized. So fast forwarding, getting all the way to the optician, which was in your question. So many times opticians will walk into the exam room for a handoff, and I have been there as a follow, like I've been following, I've been in the exam room. So they're doing this when I'm there, let alone what they're doing. I can't imagine what they're doing when I'm not there. But sometimes you'll have opticians that are like flicking their pen when they walk into the room as they're listening to the doctor. Sometimes you'll have opticians that are like leaning against the door, right? Or kind of like swaying a little bit. These are all signs of impatience, and the patient now can't listen to what the doctor or you are saying. So that will automatically create a disconnect. The other thing that opticians do that is not ideal is we think that we're waiting patiently, but they'll actually take their hands. Sorry for you people who are listening in. Watch the video. They'll take their hands and they'll put them behind their back. And what I've done here is I'm kind of like playing a little trick on you. I learned this from Vanessa Van Edwards. If you guys want to read a really great book, read her book Cues by Vanessa Van Edwards. A lot of the things that I teach in this series is about some of her trainings. But what this does is opticians will often wait like this. And automatically, because the patient can't see the optician's hands, it makes them wonder subconsciously. They don't know that they're thinking it, but it's like, hey, what's going on back there? Now they start to distrust. So when you have your hands behind your back, this is some of us see it as a sign of like, I don't know, patiently waiting, and so maybe something that's like, I don't know, at attention. But actually, it causes a lot of distress. So having your hands behind your back or having your hands in your pockets is something that you certainly don't want to be doing. And then when you grab the patient, one of the biggest verbal cues as far as opticians grabbing the patient is that we want to make sure that the doctor's prescribed recommendations are being told directly to the patient before the optician gets in the exam room, that they're being repeated in front of the optician to the optician, and the patient can hear it. And then when the optician takes the patient out to the optical, we are reiterating that same prescribed recommendation from the doctor. One of the biggest things that doctors can be doing during their handoff to the optician is to be going around and saying, okay, I prescribed for you a set of progressives. Kayla is the expert on being able to find the right progressives and everything else. So we're going to look to her for her expertise on exactly what progressive will be the best for you based upon your prescription. So what's really beautiful about that is the doctor who already has validation with being the doctor, that's why the patient is there, kind of transfers that validation over to the optician rather than I'm the doctor, I know all, I be all kind of thing. You have another basically expert there with you to be able to transfer that patient off to. We often find that offices have a much more committed patient, I guess, security when they have a handoff that's like that. So that's where I'll start with the handoff.
You mentioned before how important listening was.
Hmm.
And I think that is something that everyone agrees with, but few people do well.
Yes.
No, I don't think you're going to find a doctor who will say like, "Oh, it's not important to listen to the patient." But
Right.
I've observed enough doctors, salespeople as well. I've been in roles before where I've observed other salespeople and been had to do some coaching in that area. What I find that most people think they're much better listeners than they really are. Doctors are notorious for not being good listeners, and the data backs that up. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the studies out there, but um, the one in particular was from a book, How Doctors Think, which is a great book, by the way, if anyone wants some new reading material. But what they found in their research was that on average, the doctor will interrupt a patient within 17 seconds of the patient starting to talk. And the theory behind that is the doctor thinks they have enough information. They get just enough information, they think they've got enough, and they jump in with the solution to the problem. It actually prevents the patient from fully disclosing their full reason for the visit. And can you expand on that? I'll tell you, I was in more on the sales side. I was at a meeting Okay, it was at Vision Expo, and we were just talking about I saw you there. So I won't say the company, but I was had dinner and was sitting next to an individual, and he is a vice president of sales for a major company. You've heard of, I just won't mention the company. And I said, "Wow, that's quite a responsibility." I mean, like hundreds of salespeople that report to him. And I asked him, I said, "What is the one thing that you would say that you would the one piece of advice that you would give to other salespeople?" He's been doing this for 40 years. He said, "I wish people in sales would ask a question and then just shut up." And I wanted to hug him, Kayla, because that's what I see all the time in
That's
doctors and
awesome.
salespeople. Is like, just shut up. Let the other person talk. Let the other person tell you what they want, what their pain points are, why they don't like your product, why they don't want to spend that much money. Let them get it out, and then you can address and respond to them. But can you elaborate on the listening part?
Yes. So when it comes to listening, listening is not just silence. Listening is showing attention. We have this whole thing of active listening, repeating back, like, everyone's heard of that. So much more impactful than that is actually showing the verbal cues that you are paying attention. I'm going to refer to Vanessa Van Edwards again. She also has a master class at one of the online universities that I was able to take, which is awesome, and she is really beautiful in being able to have this detail about fronting. And fronting is when you're paying attention to a person with all of your body. So you're paying attention with your face, with your torso, with your legs, if you're sitting, with your knees pointing at them, and your feet pointing at them. So think back to a time when you were at a party or something, an event, and you can tell in the room the people that are not in conversations that they want to be in and the people that are in conversations that they want to be in. And if you look at the people that are in conversations that they want to be in, they are fully fronting with one another. Their feet, everything is pointed towards the person they're having a conversation with. Or if they're in a circle, you'll actually notice people rotate, because people often stand in a circle when we're talking. They'll rotate towards the person that's now talking. It's just kind of natural reaction. But if you start to pay attention, and I did this a lot when I was watching, I was like, they're not interested. They're not interested. People will be courteous enough to be listening, but their feet are pointed in another direction. They're halfway turned, kind of out of the conversation. This is all subconsciously being read by the person in the conversation. Now, some people are ignorant enough to not pay attention to it, but when someone's wanting to feel heard, and they can tell when there's a disconnect. So in translating that to the exam room, when you have that patient there in front of you, you really only need about 30 seconds of real connected, full fronting energy that you are giving that patient in order to allow for them to be able to be fully to feel like they are connected enough to you to be heard. Now, we have patients that are total run on patients, right? If we let them, they would talk the whole 15 minutes we were in the exam room. So we need to be conscious of being able to give them our full attention, but then also be able to control the conversation. And I think that's where doctors feel like if they just let them run on, they won't be able to control the conversation. So what it looks like is when you come into the exam room, you always want to greet your patient and attempt to shake their hand. Some people aren't handshakers, which is fine, and they'll let you know. But you can reach out and be like, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you," and not shake their hand. But most people, you want to greet your patient. This person is coming in to spend hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars with you. Give them the honor of like shaking their hand. I hate it when doctors just walk into the exam room and then sit down in their chair and start getting on their computer to open up the EHR. Don't do that. The next thing is once you greet the patient, go ahead and sit down and do not open up your computer yet. Greet them, ask them how they are, and just give them a few seconds. Oh, we're doing really great. Okay, great. I love hearing that. Now I'm going to go ahead and get on the computer. So you want to, every time you get on the computer, you want to excuse yourself to do it in these first two interactions. So you want to say, "Hey, patient, go ahead and tell me about this summer that you had. I'm going to go ahead and open up my computer here." And then they know that you're still listening rather than asking questions and not fully fronting to the patient. So this is only about a 5-ish second interaction. Once you have the EHR pulled up, You want to turn back to your patient, fully fronting with your feet and your knees and your torso and your face, all looking at the patient. And you want to ask, okay, patient, tell me what brings you in today. How have your eyes been? And you sit there and you wait. And for some of you, if you know what they're saying, and you probably already know what you're going to see in the slit lamp, you know what you're going to, what you're going to find in the phoropter, you know everything that you're going to be identifying with this patient, but don't say anything. And for some doctors, I will encourage you to count to 20. Just sit there and count. Like, you would need to be listening, but you need to be paying attention to them. And what's really funny is right here is when most patients will feel heard at this point. And you can even ask, okay, that's really interesting to me. Go ahead, and I'm going to start entering this in the computer. Again, you're excusing yourself. I'm going to go about entering this in the computer. Go ahead and elaborate a little bit more on me. And when you saw your vision was changing a little bit. So they've already felt heard. You've already got that connection. So you can keep doing the rest of your questions. You can do the rest of your exam, and normal interaction will be much more impactful because you've created that human connection. If you don't create that human connection in the beginning, what the result is that throughout the exam, the patient is trying to get in words and trying to feel heard. And it results in the patient ultimately not feeling heard, not feeling like you have a solution for them, even though you may have had the most perfect solution for them. And so just getting that out of the way in the beginning will allow for everything else. Just run your exam seriously, the rest of it, just the same as you always do. Just give me the first like minute and a half.
But it's so important, that first
Hmm.
minute and a half. I find it really interesting, and I suppose it shouldn't be surprising when you look at surveys on what patients value most in their doctors. Consistently, what comes up on the top is patients will say, doctors who make me feel heard and understood. It's not where you went to college. It's not your lab coat. It's not the fancy degrees hanging on the wall behind you. It's real simple. Doctors that make me feel heard and understood. And I'll go back to,
Hmm.
I don't think you're going to find many doctors who wouldn't acknowledge that, but I don't think we're very good at it. And I think it's so important. Like you mentioned, just ask the question and let the other person talk. Take pauses. You mentioned 20 seconds. I've actually suggested to people before to wait 3 seconds when the other person is done talking. 1,000, two
Oh, when
1,000,
they're
three
done, yeah.
1,000. Yeah, before you say anything. Because here's something, it's called, I've heard it phrased before, the power of the pause. Okay. If you want to get someone else to open up about something, do you know one of the most powerful ways to do that? I'm going to demonstrate it right now. Now, if you're listening to this, don't turn up the volume. Ready? Here it goes. Silence, right? Silence is so awkward for two people. And if I ask you a question and you say something and I feel like maybe Kayla's got more to say on this, if I just stay silent for just a few seconds, but stay in that moment, somebody's going to break because
It's
silence is
really hard for
awkward.
me
So
not to say anything.
if I don't say anything, then
Yes.
there's a good chance I'm not going to wait, 30 seconds and just stare at you oddly. But yeah, let a few seconds go by, and if there's more there, I'm communicating to you. I want to hear more, and even just sometimes the follow up questions, just to tell somebody, tell me more about that. How is this
Right.
affecting you in your real life? And then just listen. And you're right, it's just the beginning, because I know some doctors hear this and think, well, we're in a very busy practice, and that sounds great, asking all these questions, but we have to keep things moving. But I'll share two things on that. One, it's not a lot of extra time. I actually
No,
saw,
we're talking seconds.
yeah, no, and I saw a study before that the patients who rate their doctors as the best listeners, rate them as highly compassionate, empathetic, and great listeners, on average spend up to like an extra minute listening. That's not that much. And I promise you, you'll get that minute back on the back end by not having to spend so much time trying to convince people to do things that aren't in their best interest or that they're not ready to do, which naturally comes from not listening on the front end.
Right. Well, and what we have found in the practices where we implemented this full patient journey of influential communication, like I said, with the entire office, we've implemented these in a few of our member offices before we started the series, before we created the series, because we wanted to kind of like work through all the glitches. One thing we ended up finding out is that ultimately offices or doctors, excuse me, in the exam room would often spend less time through the whole exam than they normally would. And the feedback was that essentially the I guess the solution of the feedback, what we found is that you as doctors, we have the sense that the patient's not feeling heard. Therefore, we over explain at the end because we can sense this disconnect and we're trying to create validation, right? So what happens is if the doctor allows the patient to feel heard, there's this human connection, like energy. I don't want to get too woo woo on everyone, but it's basically this energy connection that happens where the patient feels validated. Therefore, the doctor also feels validated. And so when the doctor speaks from those moments on, it lands on welcoming ears. And so they're not having to explain as much to get the same, I guess, concept through to the patient. And so ultimately, doctors felt like they were less rushed in their exam times, and a lot of that came down to they didn't feel like they had to really elaborate as much, and that's because it wasn't falling on deaf ears. If you think about it, it all makes sense because people can't hear you unless they also feel heard at the same time.
Yeah, and I always like to refer to the problem behind the problem because a lot of times people just initially will tell us the initial problem, but it how is it affecting that individual? Just myopia management comes to mind because I do some speaking related to that. And you have, let's say, a parent, let's say a mom brings her child in, and we start talking about axial elongation and potential for retinal detachment in 20 years, which may or may not happen, when mom is mostly concerned that her son, she fears he may get bullied because how thick his glasses are. So we don't understand that if we're not listening. And the conversation is
That's right.
so much more impactful at the end when instead of saying you should do this to avoid a retinal detachment in 20 years versus being able to say what this means to you is that there's a better chance we slow down that progression and we don't have to put your son in a position perhaps like mom was when she was a kid and people made fun of her for thicker glasses. I'm just using that as an example,
Right.
but again, understanding what the motivators are in people's mind, it's so much more
Yes.
impactful when you go to present a solution that you connect directly with that. Not what we think is important, but what's important to the other person.
Yes, absolutely. And the same thing comes to one of my biggest pet peeves is with anti-reflective treatment. When we go to talk with a patient about anti-reflective treatment, all of us can give a stinking laundry list of all the great things, all the increased light transmission and, help with glare and all this stuff, right? Scratch resistance, all the things. But if you talk to that patient, for most patients, and it's funny because this works with elderly patients the most, is that if you talk with them about them having glare on their glasses and pictures, they don't want to be the only one at the family pictures where you can't see their eyes. Like this matters. And though we know it has all these other great benefits, that's something that's important to them. That's when they're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I don't want that. I don't want glare on my glasses when I take pictures." Like it seems so superficial, but the reality is it very much matters to the patient. And we kind of need to get out of our own, I guess, delegated posturing that we have. Like where we this is why we need it, and just go back to what's best for the patient is ultimately what's best for us as well. And if it's going to get them an anti-reflective treatment, I have no problem selling anti-reflective treatment for the sake of you're going to look better in pictures. But just because I know all of the other laundry list of items is also true and it's going to be better for them ultimately.
I know doctors are guilty of over explaining things. So, again, back to the topic of being able to communicate influentially. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
The biggest mistake I think doctors make in terms of communication is assuming the patient's head nod is a sign that they understand what the hell
Confirmation.
the doctor's saying. It's
Yeah.
not. It's actually just a polite gesture to let you know that you're listening. And I hear this a lot in the optical. It's funny to me because I know it's not, in context, not true. I've heard a lot of opticians say the patients agree with everything the doctor says, and then when they get to us, they don't want to do any of it. And I'm thinking, unless something really unusual happened in that hallway between the doctor's office and the optical, I don't think that's the case. I think what happens a lot of times is the patient just sits there why the doctor talks, bobs their head up and down, and we assume that the patient is on board with what we're saying or understands. Patients leave doctors' offices all the time not understanding what they were told all the time.
Right.
So, do you see that in the optical a lot? Do we over-explain things? Do we um, try to be in an attempt to be thorough? Do we sometimes lack clarity? And I'll share something with you that a speaking coach shared with me once, and I've always tried to remember this. He said, "Great communicators don't take the simple and make it complex. They take the complex and make it simple."
hmm Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that should always be the goal for the doctors and the opticians, is try to simplify it. Try and connect with that patient on where it's going to be most beneficial for them to have this product or your prescribed recommendation or whatever it is in your office. Now, here's one thing that I want to be that I want to highlight as far as influential communication. And this goes both for doctors and for opticians. And this is another concept that I read in Vanessa Van Edwards' book and started implementing in practices about a year ago. And it has been fabulous. The first is maintaining volume. And the second is unintentional questions. So maintaining volume. So many times in the exam room and out in the optical, we will start our conversation with the patient. We'll start making the prescribed recommendations and we'll drop our volume level. So we'll make the first pair prescribed recommendation at a good volume, let's say like at a 6. And then we'll end up dropping it down to like a 4. And then by the time we get to the third pair, we're darn near whispering. So it would sound a little something like this. Hey, patient, today I'm prescribing you a set of progressives. It will help with your distance, intermediate, and reading. It'll be more of your full-time pair. Now, I'm also prescribing you a set of computer glasses, and these will be great when you're at the office. And then last, I'm also going to prescribe you a set of sunglasses. See how it like tapers down? Opticians do the same thing with their volume when it comes to giving quotes. So, or giving the pricing. So we're telling our patient, okay, patient, we've got this, this, and this on your glasses. You're going to love these glasses, and it's going to be $147, or it's going to be $1,022, right? They get really, really, really quiet. This is something that I see happening all the time back in the exam room and in the optical. And what this does is it portrays a lack of confidence, right? So what you want to do, and what's beautiful about this
Just
is it
wrote
just
down
takes a little bit of
confidence. That's why you can't.
it just makes a
People are
little, it
going
just
to
takes
have
a
to
little
watch
bit
the
of
the video, I guess, to follow some of this. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. A
that's
communication
okay.
error, by the way. Continue, please.
That's okay. So what it does is it portrays a lack of confidence. And what happens is in the exam room, let's just be real. Um, Glasses are available everywhere. They're available online. They're available in big box stores. They're available everywhere. So when you're making your prescribed recommendation from the exam room and you are kind of lacking in your volume, you're showing a lack of confidence. And so immediately it sends up the little spidey senses on the back of on the back of the patient's neck going, "Mm, what's off? What's off?" No, they don't even know that their spidey senses are being triggered, but this is typical human communication. Goes way back to the caveman days, where we don't show confidence. If we're lacking confidence, we trail off in our volume. Okay. Now let's talk also about unintentional questions, and this is one of the most powerful things that doctors and opticians can just give a little bit of mindfulness to be able to stop it. To stop. So unintentional questions sound a lot like this. So um basically it's when you are asking a question, or you're making a statement but you're portraying it like a question. So in Vanessa Van Edwards, she talks a lot about her daughter, where her daughter, she might go, okay, did you take a cookie from the cookie jar? And her daughter will go, no. Like, do you believe me? Like, she said no, but she asked it like a question, right? That's one of the most obvious versions of it. But we do the same thing in the exam room. And when I was reading this book initially, I was like, oh my gosh, this happens all the time with doctors. And I was like, wow, this is really great. So it would sound a little something like this. Hey, patient, today I'm prescribing you a set of progressives. This will make it more convenient with your distance, intermediate, and reading. I'm also prescribing for you a set of computer lenses. Do you hear how it's coming up at the end? right? But just a little bit of mindfulness, being very conscientious about bringing that level down would sound something like this. Okay, patient, today I'm prescribing you a set of progressives. This will make it more convenient for your distance, intermediate, and reading. I'm also prescribing you a set of computer lenses. Notice how much more confidence is relayed just in maintaining your volume. So what's really funny is that once you are aware of this in the exam room, when you're making your prescribed recommendations, I get so many emails from ODs that are like, I had no idea I was asking a question. And what this does is it puts this sense of questioning. The patient now goes from listening to now being critical, like, okay, what am I missing, right, when you ask an unintentional question. So it's something that just a little bit of mindfulness can be really, really powerful. Opticians are the worst. We do it all the time. So even when we're greeting, we'll be like, hi, my name is Kayla. Like, hi, my name is Kayla. Like, it's so much more powerful. If you want to have more perceived as being having more authority, you need to really pay attention to how you are speaking to have your questions come off as questions and your statements come off as statements.
There's so many things you're hitting on. I think you're talking about sort of those subconscious cues that
Hmm.
are inside all of us that we probably don't even pay attention to on either side. But if we go off track with that, it creates a level of distrust and a lack of confidence. I think of the doctor typing away on a EHR while the patient's talking, with their back to them, and the patient who's feeling unheard, or the optician who doesn't make eye contact. You start to wonder, are they being honest? What's off?
Right.
What are you withholding from me? Or you mentioned before the hands behind the back. It's a lot of these little gestures that trigger um, that something is off. And as you know, I'm sure most of our decisions are made emotionally. Emotions drive most of the things that we do. What do they
Yes.
say? It's 95% of what we do is driven by emotions. It's how we feel. And so much of our time is spent in with doctors and with opticians in trying to get people to think differently, right? That's all through the education. The doctors do it in the exam room, opticians do it out in the optical. We try to get people to think differently, and that's important. But a real key to being influential is getting people to feel differently about something. And that kind of speaks back to the connection part. If I understand what's really important to you, what are you passionate about? What problems are you having? And I understand you. Not only do I understand you, but you feel heard. I allow you to feel heard and feel understood. There's a dynamic shift there that wasn't there before if I'm just educating you about a product. Now we got a connection. Now you trust me. And now to the point that you're making is I present a solution, doing it with confidence because you're also looking at me needing that extra level of confidence from me because I'm going to ask you to hand over your credit card at some point. None of us want to do that. None of us want to give up money, but um, we're looking for a path that reduces risk, right? And whether it's a doctor, whether it's an optician, whether it's a salesperson, they can help carve out that path.
Yes, yeah. And in that connection, just to reiterate, that connection that you're building, that connection is trust. And that's something that I had not realized for years that we were missing in the optical industry with getting our patients to not walk out the door. So the thing is that we've been talking about these little tiny changes that we can be making. And some people might go, listen, I run a very successful practice, multi-million dollar practice, and it's doing really, really great. And, we just want to minimize our walkouts. We don't need to be doing these little tiny things that seem so unimportant. They're minuscule. Why would this matter? I'm telling you, this is what freaks me out. And that's why I was like, it's freaking phenomenal the way that the results that our practices have been getting. Because if you think about having this little tiny connection with the front desk as soon as they walk in. And then the front desk does something else to build upon this little tiny connection. And then the tech, when they come out to get the patient, they do this, little thing where they actually go and approach them. They don't just call them from the hallway. That's another little connection. And then they validate the doctor that the patient's in the right spot and that the doctor's going to get them the most amazing prescription ever, and that our glasses are certainly going to be able to help. And then, so you've got all of this just building on top of each other. And then when the doctor's in there, the doctors feel um, is making the patient feel heard. And then the doctor gives a prescribed recommendation with such confidence that the patient's like, wow, they really know their stuff, right? And then the handoff. And so all of this little tiny buildup, though these are little things, it might seem like it doesn't mean anything. I'm telling you right now, these things in implementation have actually, I've been training on stop the walkouts, right? Let's minimize our walkouts. Let's increase our capture rate. Like I've been teaching on all of these things for the longest time. I have never seen such a dramatic effect for practices than when they start doing this in their office. I mean, they're already doing the other things, but so are the rest of us, right? Or we're attempting to. But this actually lets it fall on welcoming ears and allows a trust and connection with patients because there's all these little tiny things throughout the entire visit that by the time they get to the optician, they stink and love you and they want everything that you have to offer. And it's beautiful. So it has made a huge impact with being able to have that connection.
You mentioned they love you. Let's stay there for a second. No, it's really important. I had written down likable, but let's just go straight to love. Um, it makes all these things, and again, these are sometimes the things that we don't think about that drives a lot of our that makes us more influential. I asked doctors this before. I say, you want to know a great way to it's a great question to ask yourself. Do patients like me? Not are patients neutral toward me, but do patients actually like me? Um, if you like someone, here's the where the research gets um, kind of crazy. We are 6 times more likely to believe somebody when we
If
like
you
them.
like them.
So a lot of these
Mhm.
things are the things that will actually increase. And also, if you're doing the things that put people in a better mood, from the minute they walk in the door, their experience at the front desk, their experience with pre-testing, not just go, I mean, we could make that really lame and uneventful, right? Here's some paperwork, fill it out.
A lot of them
Oh,
are.
yeah, and Tammy now will take you in pre-testing, and then you get your eye puff and other things. Then they take you in the exam room and do some more tests there. I'm talking about an experience that actually improves your mood. This
Mhm.
data also shows that we are much more receptive to um, sales scenarios when we're in a better mood. So if you're
Mhm.
taking somebody who walked in that front door, maybe it was just, okay mood, and you put some things in action that actually improve their mood by the time they get to their optical, there's a greater likelihood that they're going to buy from you and buy more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I'll also speak to, I agree with all of that. I will also speak to, we have a lot of doctors that come to us that are like, listen, my patients love me. Look at the Google reviews. Dr. Smith is great. He's really fabulous. Dr. Jones, she's amazing. Okay, great. This is why I go there because they're amazing. That's awesome. That's really great. You have that validation as a doctor. What can your team be doing to also be on that list? Right? Sometimes you'll have the total, can I say kick-ass? Kick-ass optician? That can sell like crazy. The patients love them. They sell multiple pairs. They sell far and beyond the other opticians in the office, which is totally fabulous. They have that it factor. They have that thing. They're able to create that connection. And that's what I was able to do for all of these doctors, before I started consulting. And then I realize now that it's a lot of what you're doing, but it's more of how you're doing it. It's more of how you're saying the things and that connection that you can bond with them on. And so for the optometrists that are listening that are like, my patients love me, I don't need any of this. First off, we can always be improving. So stop that right now. And then secondly, what about the changes and the little tiny influences that your team could be making on that patient before they even get back to see you? And then solidifying that influence once they get out into the optical.
Okay, let's wrap things up there because I wanted to get back to that. We've talked about the things that people could do individually. How do you train a team? Now we're talking about culture here. So
Hmm.
if a doctor has ideas, if an optician has ideas on how to better interact and engage and be more influential with patients, and they've got it, they've got that it factor. How do we spread
Hmm.
that throughout an office?
You have to have you have to have everyone taught on how to do it. What's really funny is a lot of practice owners will say like, "Well, we'll go over it over a lunch meeting." Y'all aren't going to get anything achieved. I'm sorry, you're not. There's always way too many things going on. Somebody messed up the lunch order. Like by the time you actually get to good content, you've got about 10 minutes. And in that 10 minutes, it's not um, fruitful enough to be able to have, the good things that they can go take and implement. The biggest thing in that for optometry practices is implementation. All of us know what we should be doing. All of us know the best idea. It's just hard to get the whole team to do it. And though I would like to wave a magic wand, I have the magic words, but not the magic wand. You need to be able to have your team have a resource to be able to learn all of these things from. Plugging myself here. Spexy does have a resource, and that's how we've been able to help to make this work, is because we can teach from every single point of that patient interaction, and you're getting hours of training on this. And what's beautiful is that you have hours of training, but you don't have to take out a whole day to learn it. You can watch it in certain episodes, watch a few episodes at a time. The result is that, back to your original question, how do you train an entire team? You have to give them the resource. So are you going to take them on a whole retreat and do a whole influential communication retreat? You certainly can. But the more, I guess, adaptive resources, being able to have a resource where you can learn it all together. And what's beautiful is then you sit down, so everyone starts watching these videos on their own. Then you sit down at your team meeting and you're like, okay, Kayla, how are we going to implement at the front desk? What are the 3 things you're going to be doing? All right, Mary, back in as my tech, what are we going to be doing? Even your scribes have some influence that they can be having with the patient interaction as well. So there's a lot of beautiful changes that you can be implementing. I say give them the resource to learn it. And then when you guys meet as a team, that's when it's up to you to be able to, as the leader, put things into practice and make sure that things are actually happening.
If an office was willing to do it, do you think there'd be value in role play?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. I do. At the same time, role play sucks. Everyone hates it. Nobody likes role play. It super, super sucks. What's beautiful about um, being able to have a video resource to watch is because I take the dorkiness and I like embrace it, right? So you can see the dorkiness interactions. You can see some examples. Therefore, it's not just reading a script and then starting to implement it. You can actually see it in action, which is usually much easier for people to mimic than, reading a script, trying to find the right enunciations and trying to put the right emphasis on certain things. And it's something that it's much easier to have a role play once you see the different opportunities that are available. So that's what can happen with video, which makes it really convenient.
Yeah, completely agree. I think for an office, that's why I started by saying if an office was willing to do it, because nobody likes it. It is awkward. I will say the feedback that you get from some role play or something like that it can be incredibly valuable too. Because a lot of times you don't see your own flaws in communication.
Mhm.
And I'm pulling from work that I've done in being a part of Toastmasters for a while. I don't know if you're ever part of that.
Yes.
Working with speaking coaches
No.
it is awkward, but you have to get up and talk in front of people, and you get the feedback. And the feedback, you get used to it. At first, it's kind of hard to hear, and then you want to hear it. But when I first started speaking, some of the feedback I got was I was too monotone, and I thought, no, I'm not. And then I heard it because they asked us to record ourselves, and I was talking like
Yes.
this. And
Well,
I thought,
yeah.
okay, that doesn't convey confidence at all. So I had to learn to speak differently, but I didn't hear it. So if you're open to doing some form of, even if it's just small scale role play in an office where you trust each other enough to give that feedback. I mean, maybe you have an optician trying to sell a pair of glasses to another optician, and then just other people giving the feedback. I will say it can be incredibly um, informative to people who really, you have to
Yes.
want to get better though.
The other thing I will say about role play is oftentimes role play, you're already putting yourself out there. The level of vulnerability doing role play is really, that's the hardest thing to overcome, right? Because now
Hmm.
you're opening yourself up to criticism. Another thing that we recommend within the series for our Stop the Walkouts is to have doctors and opticians alike set up a camera and record yourself. For doctors in the exam room, you can record yourself actually with the camera, or you can just listen to audio, but it'll allow for you to go, wow, I didn't even realize. And in some places we have to disclose to the patient that we're recording, but even just to have them have something there, you can tell them we're going to turn it off if you need to, but to have something there where you can hear back what you're saying, you realize sometimes you all sound like a
Hmm.
dodo.
Hmm. Agree. Yeah.
you know and the same thing goes for opticians, where in a role play situation, it still is not the actual situation, right? It's still a drill. So having the opportunity out in your optical, sometimes I know some of us have security cameras, things like that. Being able to sit down and go, cut some clips and go, all right, Kayla, sit down. I want you to watch your last three interactions and just tell me things that you might want to build on. And then walk out of the room. And you don't have to watch it with them, and you don't have to whatever, but give them the opportunity to watch what they're doing and to be able to make their own criticism on themselves will sit much more powerfully than somebody else criticizing them, because then you often get defensive. So
Yeah.
just a little
And you
opportunity.
can take these skills past the exam room too. I think that maybe that's
Yes,
enough to motivate people, knowing that it's not just about selling another pair of glasses or just being influential with a patient, but these skills are pretty universal. It's just human nature. So make you a
very
better,
much so.
parent,
Communicator overall.
leader. Yeah, a lot of other
Yeah.
aspects. So,
One thing
but
that one one thing that we train on. Do we have just a minute?
we
If I could
sure
ask
do.
real
Yeah.
fast.
For
We
you,
sure do.
just for you.
Okay. So we train also on the verbal communication with opticians, overcoming objections, and using the phrase yes and. And I learned this from a gentleman named Vin. He's a huge communicator in the speaking space. And his handle, for those who want to follow him, is AskVInh. And he's a genius. And he has this whole concept of yes and. And the concept of yes and is when someone comes to you with an objection or they're saying something, the alternative is saying yes, but, or no, but. So when you come to me and you ask me a question or you say something and my response and it has a but in it, it's like, well, it basically puts up a wall, is what it does. So my example in my personal life is for Valentine's Day, my husband took me out on a date on Valentine's Day. We got all dressed up and I was in my high heels and everything else. And it was like a freeze in town. And I was like, why is it so damn cold? It's a crazy, crazy cold. And we're walking back to the car and like the car doors like stuck because it's so cold. And we get in the car and my husband's like, did you have, how did you like it? How was dinner? And I was like, yeah, but what? And I caught myself saying yes, but, because there's a lot of power in saying yes and, because it starts now he's going to start thinking, oh, here comes the negative stuff. So in your personal life, you can use yes and with being able to say, yeah, I did. And it was actually quite comical how he couldn't get the darn door open because it was so cold, right? So now he's not questioning himself. Well, you can do the same thing with your patients with using yes and instead of yes, but when it comes to objections. So for an example, your patient might say, your glasses are too expensive. And for us, oftentimes we want to say, yeah, well, you get what you pay for.
Mhm.
You know?
You
But
just did
if
that
we
with the
say
arms crossed and the
the whole sass.
a little sass. Yeah.
But the reality is that if you just think about all the times when you say but when you're having a conversation, when you're apologizing, it's a good one to say yes and instead. But with your patient, you can be using yes and as well. So your glasses are too expensive. Yeah. And the reason why is because the glasses that we produce here will give you exceptional clarity. And that said, we do have beautiful frames to fit nearly every budget. So let's find a style that you like. And we'll go about finding different pricing options. Where if the patient said, your glasses are too expensive, and I say, yeah, but that's what they are. Or, but we have a value line, but we have, the patient isn't feeling heard at that point. Or no, actually it's not. We have a value line. Well, now you just, countered their objection. And so they're not listening. And so these are a lot of things that I train on. You are 100% right, are powerful in the practice, but you can also utilize them in your personal life. And it'll change how much of a improved communicator you are in your personal life as well.
Yes, and we'll close there. See what I did there?
Good job.
I was listening. I was listening. Well, Kayla, it's always a blast having you on, and thank you so much. You bring so much wisdom and insight. I think we have a shared interest in this topic, and I know people have to hear this. I think that communication is one of the most undervalued skills in our profession. And I hope people took something from this and continue to read and explore. There's all kinds of books out there and podcasts and stuff on being a better communicator. Don't not pay attention to those things because it's those little things, and sometimes that's all they are, is a bunch of little things that can really make a huge difference on both the clinical outcomes that you get and the financial outcomes that you get.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. Communication is literally in everything that we do in life. So you might as well, make money off of it in your practice too.
If you have to talk anyway, you might as well be good at it. I think somebody
That's
told me
right.
that once. So, but thank you so much.
Mhm.
And we'll close out here. Oh, tell us about your company. Where can people find you? Find out more about your company, hire you. Where do they need to go?
You can find everything that you need to know at www.bspexy, Bespexy, bspexy.com. You can just Google Spexy too, because we have such an awesome name. It comes right up on Google, which is great. And then you can certainly go ahead and look on there. We're also available. We have some beyond the screened options because I do teach on screen as far as the trainings all the time, but we have beyond the screen options where you can go in there and stay in touch with all of the in-person events that we're doing. We're at many, many shows. I think we're at a show every other week through almost the summer. So you can find us hopefully locally.
Awesome. Oh, well, thanks again. And we will probably see you then at one of those events coming up. So you're very busy. That's very good. So thanks so much, Kayla.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you in the next episode.